Hello everybody, my name is Boulevard. Welcome to Tournament Tactician, the premier tournament tier list for Legends of Runeterra. So we've got our first big open event this weekend, the Online League Series number 48. If you want to play in that, the sign-up link is in the description below. We've had a couple of smaller tournaments here and there. This is going to be the first one where like Europeans are really allowed to play and show off their meta and how it mingles with the Americas meta. There have been a few smaller events. I've looked at them. I haven't really noticed any major trends, so we're kind of weighing ladder against the tournaments that I have seen. The lines are pretty muddy this week between Tier 1 and Tier 2, but it's a pretty low-stakes environment. We'll really be able to dial things in once we actually get to the seasonal patch, which I don't know if that's actually coming next week or if it's coming in 2 weeks. I don't know. What I do know is that Kai'Sa Demacia is Tier 1. It's the standout deck of the format right now. A lot of different variants of this running around. We have the Mono Kai'Sa, the Kai'Sa with Sivir, the Kai'Sa with Akshan, and it doesn't feel like any of them are particularly far and away better than the other variants. It does feel like a lot of preference on, do you really like the Akshan style of play and getting value out of that? Do you like having access to search your Kai'Sa with Rite of Calling? Or do you feel like you need other threats in your deck, like Sivir, to, when you don't draw the Kai'Sa, sort of facilitate that? So it really just does come down to preference here. But that's, I mean, we all know Kai'Sa's good. It's been the topic of conversation for the last week and a half. Still no Evelynn or Gwen decks have really stuck out to me enough to make it onto the tier list, but Kai'Sa sitting pretty solidly in Tier 1. Thralls, probably going to remain low Tier 1, high Tier 2 at worst until they receive some kind of additional nerfs or the meta shifts pretty heavily. Bard Alawi really picking up a lot of popularity in the last couple of days. It's a deck that I personally like playing on ladder. And the reason that I picked it up to play on ladder is because I was playing Winding Light, which has actually been knocked down to Tier 2, and I noticed that I was struggling a lot with Kai'Sa Demacia because there were a lot of Kai'Sa, like leveled Kai'Sas on curve coming down, and the Acathian Rain would just clear out, you know, one or two of my units, and that was enough to kind of keep me under control going into the Winding Light turn. And I just really couldn't build up the board. I was, you know, the double up on supercharge from one unit onto the Kai'Sa just means that a lot of overwhelm damage is coming through. And now a lot of the Kai'Sa Akshan builds specifically are running triple Void Blaster, which is the 4/4 overwhelm. So just a lot of damage getting pushed through early. Winding Light not playing great on defense against overwhelm. It does mean that this now feels kind of like a Tier 2 deck for me. So I was looking for something that could handle the Acathian Rain as well as stand up to a Zero Aurelia should I run into it. Now, Annie Twisted Fate was doing okay for me, but I felt like I could find something better, and that happened to be Bard Alawi because I felt like I could go wide enough to handle a Zero Aurelia with healthy enough units that I could actually freely block Sand Soldiers while also not dying to a Acathian Rain. And it turns out that that was a pretty good call. A lot of people picked up on the deck later on, and Bard Alawi has been the #1 deck for the last, I want to say, 2 or so days, with an insane win rate and play rate in Masters on the Americas ladder specifically. But the list hasn't really changed too much. It's just the sort of new card, the 6-mana 4-damage spell coming out, that's doing a lot for players, as well as the deck just being pretty well positioned into what the actual top end of the meta looks like. I don't think Bard Alawi's like particularly insane. It's not like the most powerful deck we've ever had. It's just a nice, consistent mid-range deck that can handle the other decks that we're seeing. So I'd highly expect to see an insane amount of this on this weekend specifically. I don't think there's any other big Bard decks that are really vying for the spot. Like Bard Poppy, Bard Ari have really kind of fallen off a cliff. I've heard Bard Shen making some waves as a counter to Bard Alawi. Bard Vi, of course, Trevo's seasonal winning list. Like, there's a couple of Bard decks, but none of them are going to have anywhere near the presence of Bard Alawi. We are not split on the Bard by any stretch of the imagination. It is just all Alawi. And then Twisted Fate Nami. Now, this one might look a little weird to you. Right now, on the Americas ladder, the rank 1 and rank 2 player both play Nami. Now, that's not super surprising given that the rank 1 player is Drissoth, but I do think it's worth mentioning that because we are grabbing things from ladder as well as the tournaments, and there have been some winners playing TF Nami in the small tournaments that we have seen. So I would say that TF Nami is still pretty well positioned into the meta. You know, if Drissoth's still playing it and having a good time and finding rank 1 success, I'd say that that's a pretty good indicator, because Drissoth will be the first to know when TF Nami isn't actually good, and he'll drop it off pretty quickly in lieu of other decks. But that doesn't seem to be the case, so TF Nami at least sticking around for now. We'll kind of see where it goes in the coming weeks, but I'd still call this one Tier 1. Winding Light, as I mentioned, just not doing as well into the meta as it has previously. That'll probably change sometime down the line, but we'll have to see how it all does specifically tweak out. Jace Heimerdinger and Control in general actually doing pretty okay coming out to target these Bard Alawi decks. As I'd mentioned, they're pretty mid-range heavy, but they don't offer protection because your spells are only Bilgewater, so Vengeances, Ruinations, these are effective tools against something like this. And we actually saw a tournament rather recently. I don't remember which tournament or the name of the winner, but it was actually won by Triple Control with Jaceheimer, Anivia, And I can't remember the last deck. I want to say it was TF Annie, but I might actually just be relying on that last one. But I know it was I know it was Jace Heimer, and I know it was Anivia. So that was pretty surprising to me, and I think that is just an adaptation of targeting the Bartolai, which I don't think is an unreasonable sentiment coming into the weekend. Not as easy to target Kaisa Demacia because of the high number of spell shields and, of course, Rite of Negation. I don't like that the region with Rite of Negation also gets all the spell shield stuff, since you have to put 2 spells on the stack to try to pop the spell shield and kill the unit, and then Rite just obliterates it. Like, Rite of Negation could probably cost 6 mana and still be played in the numbers that it is currently, but that's an argument for another day. Papercraft Dragon has fallen off a cliff. I had to scroll down to the bottom of the ladder stats to see if Auction Papercraft was still alive. I don't have a great explanation for it. Maybe it's just people trying out the new toys. Maybe Kaisa Demacia is just faster than it. I can definitely see where Azir Aurelia is going to body this deck. You know, 1 bounce spell and all of a sudden it's just game over for you. Maybe it's too hard to maintain your units into Bartolai. Whatever it is, Papercraft Dragon has fallen off a cliff in the last couple of days. I think it was still doing well in the opening week, but now just absolutely nowhere. I think it'll still be fine. Like, you could probably still make top 8 with it. You could probably even win the tournament with it. You know, it's still a pretty proactive strategy, and I'm not, like, down and ready to dog on it just yet. I think it's fine. I wouldn't recommend it like I would for the seasonal, but I think it's fine. Annie Twisted Fate actually moving up to tier 2 just because I expect a pretty high presence of like a Azir Aurelia. And again, a control deck does pretty well into the Bartolai if you can find the right removal tools to line up on what your opponent actually has, weigh your threats properly. Your opponent doesn't high roll the chimes too hard against you. But Annie Twisted Fate is something that I'm much... I mean, tier 2 feels like I'm putting this thing on a golden pedestal right now. This has historically been a terrible tournament deck from the previous expansion, the World Walker season, and now tier 2 feels really high for it, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. And then, of course, Azir Aurelia. I just don't really... I think Azir Aurelia might be getting targeted a little bit too hard to really want to put it in tier 1, or I think its matchups aren't, like, as phenomenal into what we expect to be seeing to call it tier 1. Like, obviously, it's going to beat Thralls. I don't know how it does against Kaisa Demacia. I don't think it does great. Like, I think it's pretty close to 50-50. Bartolai, I could see it doing well, because any mid-range style deck where Defiant Dance gets a lot of value... I think Azir Aurelia is going to have a pretty good time. So, like, I think that Azir Aurelia could do well and you know, put significant numbers in the top cut if you see a lot of Thralls in Bartolai. But I don't think Thralls is going to have the high play rate that it's supposed to. The Bartolai might still be able to just outvalue the Azir Aurelia. Again, not super confident in Azir Aurelia, but I do recognize the strength of the deck. And then tier 3, I'm not really going to get into because, again, we don't really need to get too deep into things when we're just going into a nice, breezy, open tournament weekend. It's not the seasonal patch. We're not looking for anything super crazy. There's still new decks popping up. We're still kind of figuring out Gwen. It feels like players are maybe on the cusp with that one, but only time will tell for sure. So that's more or less where I'm feeling on things right now. If I were playing this weekend, I'd definitely be playing Bartolai. And from there, I'm a little questionable. I don't really have any preferences outside of that. Maybe I'd give Winding Light a try just to see how it does when I'm in a position to actually ban the Kaisa Demacia, because that's probably what I'd be doing. I'd probably be banning Kaisa, so I'd probably run Bartolai. I'd probably run Winding Light BNZ just because I really enjoy that deck. And then as for my third deck, I'm actually pretty up in the air. I don't really know what I would run, but again, I don't really have to. Because I'm not playing, I'm casting. But unfortunately, you know, just such a wide open meta, so many variables. This is where we're going to be getting a lot of data collected from this weekend to fuel, you know, sort of the remainder of the patch and even some things post-patch, because we have this, and then we have the Mastering Runeterra event next week, and then another online link series. So from here on out, we're eating good as far as tournaments are concerned. But going into this first weekend, there's just not a lot of data to play with, so it's all going to be very subjective, and I'm not really sure what I really expect the field to look like, because it could go a couple of different ways. But thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard. I hope this helped a little bit, and as always, good luck in your tournaments.